Today we are going to present about our project paper, and the title of our project paper is Impact of Consumption, Export and Import on Economic Growth in Malaysia. Purpose of this research paper is to figure out the relationship between consumption, export and import on economic growth in Malaysia. Some of the study shows that there is no links between import, export and consumption on economic growth. The study used time series data from World Bank, studying from year 1060 to 2019. The tests used are descriptive statistics, multiple regression, heteroscedasticity, autocorrelation, and multicollinearity. From the multiple regression model, it can be concluded that the three independent variables are statistically significant at 1% confidence level. The model has no autocorrelation and multicollinearity. On the other hand, decreased tariff imposed on export now and increased tariff imposed in few years could enhance more economic growth to Malaysia.
Let me continue with the introduction part, which I will start with the background of the study. As you can see from the slide, GDP, which is gross domestic product, is a calculation of the total value of output of all resident generating units of a country over a given period. It is also known as consumption, where it defined as the use of goods and services by a household. It is also a component of in the calculation of the gross domestic product, GDP. GDP is calculated by the amount of value added. Expenditure approach, which is the sum of final expenditure, and revenue approach is the sum of revenue distributed by resident producer in terms of units. Imports are the goods and services that purchased from the rest of the world by a country's resident rather than buying domestically produced items. Export are goods and services that are produced domestically but then sold to customers in other countries. Next, the statement of the research problem is to compare and contrast the economic growth in Malaysia by using different measurement using the import, export and consumption of GDP using the sampling method to explain the results. In this slide, I'm going to explain about the objective of the study. The purpose of this research paper is to figure out the relationship between consumption, export and import on economic growth in Malaysia. Next, the significance of the study, which is to provide a deeper understanding between how the import and the export are measured to find the economic growth. To develop this relationship, this research uses pure time series analysis to find out the significant and the insignificant between the relationship of export, import, consumption and development in the economic growth.
I would like to continue this presentation by explaining the literature review in this research. Basically, the topic that we choose is the impact of export, import, and consumption on economic growth, which is three independent variables. Three dependent variables and one independent variable. As we can see in the methodology part and in previous studies, first we would like to tell that there are many scholars or many researchers did the test similar to our topic, but they have a few differentiate, which is some are doing in import, some doing in export, some didn't do consumption. So they have a various different in that part. But they also have a person who also do the research based on all these variables and also the economic growth to see the economic growth. So firstly, we'll like to separate this literature review in two parts, which is empirical review, which is we use a specific test to do the research. Another one is a theory, which is they only evaluate the thing with theory. So firstly, I would like to explain theoretical part. In theoretical part, we have Mr. Barusha Baharusha and Rashid on 1999 they did research which is the relationship between the export and the economic growth. They found the relationship between these two is export of a fundamental relationship. In the specific research, it just focus on export only. We proceed to the theoretical review. We proceed to the empirical review. I'm sorry for that. Ula et al. In 2009, they are doing the research only use specific test, which is the Eagle-Granger test was carried out to do the research. In this analysis, they found that the development of resources induced real import and not real export. There's no causal link was found between the capital formation of export and import. Basically, Ula is the one doing the research is similar to our topic, which is related to import export, but doesn't include the consumption in this topic. So they found it's not causal link between these two. That's the opinion in the theoretical in literature review. They come to methodology. The next presentation we proceed with the methodology. We have methodology is basically the specific method that we use to do the research. As we can see, we have a model specification which is we use EG formula which is using the beta and all this thing. We have three independent variable as I said earlier. Export, import and consumption is the independent variable in this test, which is the uh, dependent variable is economic growth, or as we can say GDP is the independent variable in the study. Mainly all of the study I did using eViews, which is version 11, which we as a student we use the student version to utilize the whole of this research. For this research, we use the data from 1960 to 2019, which is a long test, been a long year, because this test could be have a exact rate. We can found the exact impact between the import, export, and also consumption on the GDP. As we can see, the symbols as import, export, and economic growth, and the consumption, we simplify it by using a symbols. For proceed the test, we have a multiple tests we did. So especially we have multiple regression, heterodicity, autocorrelation, and multicollinearity. All the tests was evaluated using eViews, and all the tests have been utilized very nicely, and we found all the research by using it.
This is our findings. The skewness of asymmetric distribution, such as the normal distribution, is 0. Positive skewness means that the distribution has a long right tail, and the negative skewness implies long left tail. From the findings, we can see that our GDP and our consumption do has negative value, which implies long left tail. And another two variables, which is our export and our import, as positive values, which indicate that distribution has long right tail. Coming up with kurtosis. The kurtosis measures the thickness or the flatness of the distribution of series. The kurtosis of the normal distribution is 3. If exceed 3, it is peaked, which known as leptokurtic. If the value less than 3, it is flat, which is known as platykurtic. So the result that our kurtosis of 4 variable exceed 3, which means the distribution implies leptokurtic. The reported probability is the probability that a Jagobera statistic exceeds the absolute value under the null hypothesis. This is the multiple regression model. Coefficient of the R consumption and R export indicates negative value, which means there is a negative relationship among the R consumption and R export with the R GDP. While the R import has positive coefficient, which indicate that there is a positive relationship among the R import with the R GDP. The T statistic for our consumption and our export is in negative value, which is negative 7.00 and negative 3.202 respectively, while the T statistic for our import is positive value, which is 5.058. Since the probability for all the independent variable is less than 0.01, so we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that all the independent variables significant at 1% confidence level. The value of R square is 0.5665, where it implies that independent variables can be relied on to explain 56.65% of the variation in our GDP. Adjusted R square is 0.5429, so the data almost close to 1, where it indicates the regression almost fit the data. The result shows that Durbin-Watson statistic reported 1.6539. Therefore, the results indicate positive correlation because there is the value is less than 2.
I'm going to present about findings part. First of all, heterochronicity. Heterochronicity, we need to know the regression and the removals of heterochronicity in cross-sectional regression. First, we run the regression analysis and then we apply Harvey and Arch test in the model. As we know, if the p-value is greater than 0.05 means we have to accept and there is no heterochronicity in the model. If the p-value is less than 0.05 means there is heterochronicity in the model. In our case, the probability value of Harvey test is 0.7278 and the probability value of Arch test is 0.4395. So we can conclude that p-value is statistically not significant. We have to accept the H null, the Harvey test and the Arch test shows the evidence of no heterochronicity in the model. Next is autocorrelation. To handle autocorrelation, we need to know the detection and the removals of autocorrelation in regression model. As we know, the range of Durbin-Watson is 0 to 4. If Durbin-Watson is equal to 2, it means there is no autocorrelation. If Durbin-Watson is less than 2, it shows positive autocorrelation. If Durbin-Watson is greater than 2, it shows negative autocorrelation. In our case, Durbin-Watson is 1.65. Since Durbin-Watson is less than 2, the autocorrelation will show positive sign. The other way we can ensure that our models have autocorrelation is the probability. The probability value of autocorrelation is 0.227. So we have to accept the H null because the probability value is 0.227, which is more than 0.05. By the way, we need to accept the model has no autocorrelation. Next, we conducted LM test. The probability value of LM test is 0.2308. So we can conclude that the probability value is more than 0.05. So we have no autocorrelation in the model. Next is multicollinearity. First, we apply the detection test of multicollinearity, which is variance inflation factor. If the value is equal or greater than 10, it means there is presence of multicollinearity. If the value is less than 10, it means there is no presence of multicollinearity in the model. So from the table, we can see that the variance inflation factor is 3.237615. So we can conclude that there is no presence of multicollinearity in the model.
But for the presentation is the conclusion. So I want to make a summarize from our research is relationship. So our research is about the relationship between Malaysian export, import and consumption with economic growth. So from our research, we can find out that export and GDP are negative correlated, which means that if export decrease, the GDP also will decrease. So another is if import and GDP are positive correlated, which means that if the import is increase, the GDP also increase. So we can find out that the Malaysian economic growth are affected by all the variables, which is import, export, and consumption. So another next is policy implication. Uh, First is decrease the tariff imposed to export. So which means we decrease the tariff to the product that we export to the foreigner country, so that the foreigner will get our product in low price and will increase our attract the product will attract more foreigner product, so we can increase our production. So next is limitation on import. So when we limit the import, so the demand for the local product will increase. So more Malaysian people will uh, buy foreign our local product. So our production also will increase. So last is suggestion. So our suggestion is to increase the labor force and promote local product. So when the uh, we limit our import product, so our demand for our local product will increase. So that we need our more labor force to produce more productivity. So that we need more labor force. It will give chance more work chance for everyone, Malaysian people, and also it is one another way to promote our local product to Malaysian people.